Because understanding great literature is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. On the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, we commit to reading, dissecting, and analyzing the great books of the Western canon. You know, those books, from Jane Austen to Shakespeare, and everything else in between, that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school. We do this for our listeners, the owner, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the civic leader who doesn't have the time to read, dissect, analyze, and leverage insights from literature to execute leadership best practices in the confusing and chaotic postmodern world we all now inhabit. Welcome to the rescuing of Western civilization at the intersection of literature and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. Hello, my name is Hasan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 137. Usually on this podcast, on this show, we make every attempt to cover books that you would find strictly categorized or in the business section of Barnes & Noble. Actually, we make every attempt to avoid those kinds of books, actually. Our selections metaphorically roam around that store, if you could imagine it in your mind, assiduously avoiding the temptation to violate our show's founding principle, which is usually stated in our open, that for leaders, quote, understanding great books is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. However, we have violated this principle once so far in the 300 plus total episodes when we covered Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, with guest co-host Atlas Altman in a bonus episode that we recorded last year. I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that. That was a great episode. And we are about to violate that principle yet again at the beginning of season 4 this year. But this book will be worth it, I think. It is said that some men pursue greatness, some men fall into greatness, and some men have greatness thrust upon them. But there are some men who just show up great from the jump, and one of those men is the author of the book that we are covering today. I fundamentally believe, and I don't know if my guest co-hosts are going to agree with me, but we're going to find this out today. I fundamentally believe that this book should be required reading, not only in business school, even in our hyper attention getting era, but it should be required reading in the humanities department as well. Today, we will extract, or will attempt to extract, leadership lessons from what I consider to be one of the best leadership books, if not possibly the best leadership business book of the late 20th century, Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. Leaders, to paraphrase from Ogilvy, we sell or else. Now, today on the podcast, we will be joined in our conversation by both an old guest co-host, which you'll see on the video there, and a new person on the scene who we reached out to this year for the show. Returning from a triumphant conversation last year in episode number 147, where we discussed Ray Bradbury's classic tale of censorious societies, Fahrenheit 451, I'd like to welcome back to the show John Hill, a.k.a. Small Mountain. How you doing, John?
I'm doing really well, man. Your vocabulary just continues to impress. Like, it's just always delightful to talk to you.
Yeah, it's always awesome to kind of have these conversations and to sort of figure out, like, what it is that these books mean and how they can impact leaders. And then joining us again on our show today, a new person, is Chris Widner. See, I keep failing at it. Widner. Now, he has a wealth of experience in leadership across sports, customer support, HR, IT startups, and he even has a passion for enhancing team performance. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, and I am ready for your extensive vocabulary.
I do have a voluminous vocabulary. I will not censorious, voluminous. I will say this. Chris did submit his bio from Microsoft Copilot. So AI has already sneaked into the show. I, however, still handwrite all or hand type all of my scripts.
AI loves me, as you can tell by the way that it describes it. So thank you, AI Overlord.
There you go.
You hear it.
All right. So we're going to jump in as we usually do. The format of the show has not changed. I'm going to open up with a reading of a selection from Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. And then we will jump into a little bit on the literary life of David Ogilvy. There's a lot of information that we were able to pull together. And I'm going to ask both Chris and John some questions about David Ogilvy and about his life. And then we're going to jump into the work itself and talk about what are some of the lessons that leaders can pull from this book. So, as usual, you can hear the book there if you're listening at home, or if you're watching, you can watch me open it up. And by the way, the version that I have, and I always mention this, was published by South Bank Publishing way back in the day in 1963, and so I would recommend going out and getting it. You can get it on Kindle. I know John got his on Kindle. It's a very hard book to get in the physical form. I actually ran across it at a used bookstore, like 4 or 5, more than that, like 6 or 7 years ago now. And like I said, it was weirdly difficult to get a hold of, and I don't understand why, but maybe we could talk a little bit about that as we go. So picking up from Confessions of an Advertising Man, I'm going to open up with 4 problems. Today, the world of advertising faces 4 problems of crisis dimensions. The first problem is that manufacturers of packaged goods products, which have always been the mainstay of advertising, are now spending twice as much on price-off deals as on advertising. They are buying volume by price discounting instead of using advertising to build strong brands. Any damn fool can put on a price reduction, but it takes brains and perseverance to create a brand. There used to be a popular brand of coffee called Chase and Sanborn. Then the manufacturers started price discounts. They became addicted to them. Where is that brand today? Dead as a doornail. Listen to the speech I made in Chicago in 1955. The time has come to sound an alarm, to warn manufacturers of what is going to happen to their brands if they spend so much on deals there is no money left for advertising to build their brand. Deals don't build the kind of indestructible image, which is the only thing that can make your brand part of the fabric of life. Andrew Ehrenberg of the London School of Business is one of the best brains in marketing today. He reports that a cut price offer can induce people to try a brand, but they return to their habitual brands as if nothing had happened. Why are so many brand managers addicted to price cutting? Deals? Because the people who employ them are only interested in the next quarter's profit. Why? Because they are more concerned with their stock options than the future of their company. Price off deals are a drug. Ask a drug-addicted brand manager what happened to his share of the market after the delirium of the deal subsided. He will change the subject. Ask him if the deal increased his profit. Again, he will change the subject. Marketers who have inherited brands built by their predecessors are dealing them into oblivion. Sooner or later, they discover that they cannot deal brands which nobody has heard of. Brands are the seed corn they have inherited. They are eating their seed corn. These cut price boobies also have a habit of trying to cut the price of their agency's services. Clients who haggle over their agency's compensation are looking through the wrong end of the telescope. Instead of trying to shave a few measly cents off the agency's 15%, they should concentrate on getting more sales results from the 85% they spent on time and space. This is where the leverage is. No manufacturer ever got rich by underpaying its agency. Pay peanuts and you get monkeys. The second problem is that advertising agencies, notably in Britain, France, and the United States, are now infested with people who regard advertising as an avant-garde art form. They have never sold anything in their lives. Their ambition is to win awards at the Cannes Festival. They bamboozle their unfortunate clients into paying millions of dollars a year to exhibit their originality. They aren't interested in the products they advertise and assume that the consumer won't be either, so they say almost nothing about their virtues. At best, they are mere entertainers, and rather feeble ones at that. Many of them are art directors who, being visually minded, don't read anything themselves and make it impossible for consumers to read the copy I write. At a luncheon recently, I heard an angry manufacturer refer to these self-indulgent idiots as mincing pansies. Given my education, I might have fallen into this trap myself if I had not spent 5 years selling kitchen stoves door to door. Once a salesman, always a salesman. The third problem is the emergence of megalomaniacs whose mindset is more financial than creative. They are building empires by buying up other agencies to the consternation of their clients. The fourth problem is that advertising agencies still waste their clients' money repeating the same mistakes. I recently counted 49 advertisements set in reverse, white type on black background, in one issue of a German magazine, long years after research demonstrated that reverse is difficult to read. During a 10-hour train ride, I read the ads in 3 magazines. Most of them violated elementary principles which were discovered in years gone by and set out in Confessions. The copywriters and art directors who created them are ignorant amateurs. What is the reason for their failure to study experience? Is it that advertising does not attract inquiring minds? Is it that any kind of scientific method is beyond their grasp? Are they afraid that knowledge would impose some discipline on them or expose their incompetence? David Mackenzie Ogilvy was born June 23rd, 1911, and died July 21st, 1999. He was born in West Horsley, Surrey, in England. His mother was Dorothy Blue Fairfield, daughter of Rowan Fairfield, who was a civil servant from Ireland. His father, Francis John Longley Ogilvy, was a stockbroker. He attended St. Cyprian School at an early age and later won a scholarship at 13 to Fettes College in Edinburgh. In 1929, he won another scholarship to Christ Church, Oxford, which he left 2 years later after failing his exams. In 1931, he became a kitchen hand at the Hotel Majestic in Paris. After a year, he returned to Scotland and started selling AGA cooking stoves, as he already mentioned, door to door. His success in this marked him out to his employer, who asked him to write an instruction manual, the theory and practice of selling the AGA cooker, for the other salesmen. 30 years later, Fortune magazine editors called it, quote, the finest sales instruction manual ever written. In 1938, Ogilvy traveled to the United States, where he worked for George Gallup's Audience Research Institute in New Jersey. And during World War II, he worked for the British Intelligence Service at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. He analyzed and made recommendations on matters of diplomacy and security. After the war, he bought a farm in Pennsylvania and lived among the Amish. Having worked as a chef, researcher, and farmer, Ogilvy then started his own advertising agency with the backing of Mather and Crowther, the London agency being run by his elder brother Francis, which later acquired another London agency, S.H. Benson. The new agency in New York was called Ogilvy, Benson, and Mather. And at age 75, Ogilvy was asked if there was anything he'd always wanted, but had somehow eluded him. His reply was knighthood and a big family, 10 children. His only child, David Fairfield Ogilvy, was born during his first marriage to Melinda Street. The marriage ended in divorce in 1955, as did his second marriage to Anne Cabot. Ogilvy married Herta Lons in France in 1973. Finally, while Ogilvy was most famous for building and establishing brands, he was primarily interested in direct marketing, and you could see that reflected in Confessions of an Advertising Man. He initially built his agency by using direct mail promotion. He ran direct response advertisements in major newspapers to generate leads. In a video titled We Sell or Else, he praised direct marketing and direct marketers while pillaring general or branding advertising, at one point saying that branding people, quote, worship at the altar of creativity. I wonder, after 25 years of the internet, what Ogilvy would say now, particularly after that Mercedes ad just dropped at the end of last year that didn't even mention the car. So let's start off here. There's a lot there, and as usual, I front load all of the interesting information. But I'd like to find out what John and Chris thought about Confessions of an Advertising Man. So let's start off there. John, what did you think about this book? You're in sales. You're a salesman. Neither of us are salesmen. I mean, yes, we sell or else we die in our roles. But you are a salesperson, right? This is why I wanted to have you on this show about this. So what do you think of the book? I know it's the first time you read it and touched on it. What were your thoughts about David Ogilvy and Confessions of an Advertising Man?
So I love direct response copy, right? I think that after being good in conversations, being able to write well and get your point across is probably the second most important thing for sellers to really be thinking about, right? Because how do you get the meeting? How do you get the appointment? And way back in the day, I got really into like copy blogger and stuff like this, and just like really into it, and was studying it. And then whenever I really tried to put myself out there online, everyone was talking about Ogilvy in this book, and I was like, okay, I'll come back to that later, and was super excited to dive into it. I I have a lot of notes in my Kindle on this book actually because I couldn't get the hard copy in time, and there's a lot of very interesting takes in here that I was not expecting just based upon like how he conveys himself. I
Mhm.
imagine he's probably or was probably insufferable to work for and work under.
Oh,
And,
probably. Oh, for sure.
but it's a thin line as the saying goes. But there was some really delightful stuff in here that I wish more people were thinking about whenever they're launching ads. And now everything is so ad driven and it's so accessible to, micro businesses and small businesses. It's not just the big names anymore. And there's a lot of people trying to be copywriters, and I have to argue with people constantly that content writing is not the same thing as direct response copywriting, and they're very different skill sets and all these things. So I think I think that this is a good book. I'm curious to what you guys think about. Is this like the business book that he puts out there so that way people come in his direction, or is it his flag in the sand of like this is what it should be? Because like I could see it going both sides. There's some
Mhm.
really good stuff in here, but I don't think I would enjoy having a beer with the guy.
Interesting. So yeah, great question there. And I do think he actually mentioned in there that part of the intent of the book, I think he said something like, I wanted to sell 1,000 copies.
Mhm.
And that may have been in the newer edition port. I don't know. But I know he mentioned that, but it was also kind of, as you said, set that flag in the sand. And that's what I really got from it was him saying, look, you're all idiots. Here's how we should do it. I mean, he was complimentary to, some other agencies, definitely, but yeah, it was strong opinions all the way through. And they seemed to be, fairly immutable in many ways. So that was surprising to me. I was expecting him to be somebody who was really more like the people he was criticizing at points in there. Right. You mentioned that, was it the Mercedes ad?
Yes.
The car.
Yes.
Right? Him saying, yeah, some of these people are too concerned with getting awards. That's what I was expecting out of him.
Mhm.
And then to read it and be, oh, he's a salesman.
Right.
He's worried about the numbers, but
Mm-hmm.
not just the immediate numbers long term. That was a real surprise to me.
Mhm. Well, and that idea of, and I actually had a conversation before. I had a meeting before I came to the studio to record today, and it was with a person who I'm involved in another project with, right? And we were talking about, we had a wide ranging conversation, but one of the areas that we touched on was this idea of, and I'm going to have a shorts episode about it this week because it sort of sparked some things in my head, but this idea of competence, right? So we've so tied competency to whether or not I like you, to your point about, am I going to have a beer with the guy? Right.
Yeah.
We've so tied those things together. And I think there's genuine reasons why we've done that. I think it's an outgrowth of the self-esteem movement in the 80s and 90s that was in public schools. And we could talk about whether or not that's good or bad. And people have wasted a lot of digital and physical ink on whether or not that was good or bad. But the fact of the matter was it happened. And the outcome from that is, if I, and we know this, we can see it. If I'm not liked, where am I? What's my identity? Right? There's a lot of that in the world today. And that was a major shift in public schooling from the idea that you had to be good at something regardless of whether or not all this other stuff was going on, right? Competency rather than being liked. Okay, that was one shift. And then the other part of the dynamic is that people like Ogilvy, right, and people who came after him who were a little bit older, who didn't pass along, and I talk a lot about this on the podcast, didn't pass along the wisdom that was necessary to be competent to the people who came after them. So you have a problem of succession and mentorship on one end, and a problem of, and some writers will frame it as emotional fragility. I'm just going to use that framing right now just for the purposes of getting to my point. I don't actually hold completely to those terms, but you have the problem of emotional fragility and relying on others to provide my esteem on the bottom end, and now they're colliding, right? And what gets squished in between those two poles is competency. And what struck me even years ago, reading Confessions of an Advertising Man, and then going back through it again, was that he really cared about being good, to your point, John, being good at writing copy that sold.
Yeah.
He didn't really care how you felt about him. That was not a big deal for him. Matter of fact, that was probably for him like number 1053 on a list of 1,000 things in his life. And it didn't land for him. And so we do have to, I think, and by the way, this gets into this idea, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, of scamming the audience and respecting your audience. The issue of quality, which I think, to your point about John, about the world being ad driven, absolutely everything is ad driven. I mean, if he were alive right now, he'd be looking at the social media landscape and he would probably vomit. He probably would. And then he'd go hide in his castle somewhere. Like J.K. Rowling. You'd have a castle right next to J.K. Rowling and just hide all day. He might tweet once, maybe, if he felt like it. But because the thing there is, the audience is not being, and I think this is what would drive him crazy, more so than the explosion of ways to touch the audience. I think he'd be fine with that. I think he would be mortified by the level of, and I'm going to use the word that the Boing Boing website creator came up with, the process of enshittification that has happened in advertising copy and in sales and marketing. And you're fighting uphill against this, John. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We've talked about that on this show before.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the idea, I am, one of the things I want to do this year on the podcast is I want to be able to talk about how do we move forward from chaos, right? How do we move forward into a place outside of this thing? Because I genuinely think and I know you and I have had conversations about this offline, John. Chris and I have had conversations about it. And when we talk, I think we're at the end. I think in my gut, we're at the end of chaos. Will chaotic things happen? For sure. But I think we're at the end. I know. I see you. I see your eyebrows. I think we're at the end of chaos. I think we are. And I think it's time for rebuilding, because we can't be in constant chaos. You can't be in constant chaos without rebuilding something, right? And where do we start? And this is my driving question, particularly again in the maybe in the sales and marketing and the leadership and business space. Where do we start building something different? How do we do that? What are the touch points to do that, regardless of what we may feel? And I'm not saying the feelings are irrelevant. I'm just saying we've prioritized them over other things. And so maybe it's time to prioritize something else when you're building something else. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Man, there's a lot in there, honestly.
There's a lot in there. I got a document dumped. I did a document dumped.
Yeah, I don't know that I really have a whole lot to say on that zoomed out super view that you just kind of talked about, right? Because, some of that I agree with. I don't think he would be someone who would be leaning into social media like at all. I think he would, put his ideas out there and then have to deal with some person who's like, well, not in my experience. And like, even though they don't have any, and he would just, go, off on people and stuff like that. So, but I love the idea that, it's more accessible to smaller brands and smaller people these days. Like, I think that's really cool. With that accessibility is going to come a whole lot of people hopping in there with way too much ego and not enough experience. And, the output on that is, because I'm a sales guy, is there's lots of completely ad driven sales pipelines, right? So I'm a full cycle guy. I like going out and getting the appointment. I like qualifying for it. I like making sure that it's a good fit. But there's a whole community of just people who just go around looking for people that are running ads and generating stuff from that, everything. And there's a lot of very interesting trade-offs if that's how you want to sell, and I've tried it, and there's all the get rich quick schemes and things like that that happen with ads. And, the FTC is now entered the chat with going after some of these like advertisers for the bold claims that are not repeatable that are being promised in some of these ads. And, it does create a lot of chaos, as far as, is it good? Every time my wife sees my daughter watch an ad, anywhere, and my daughter gets, excited about it, my wife is like, it's probably crap, right? Like, she's so against the whole thing, which is hilarious because she's my editor. So it's getting harder and harder to like know like what is real and what is solid, which puts more focus on the buyer. Most buyers don't want to put in the effort to educate themselves, but then they're all mad whenever it doesn't meet their expectation. So, it creates some very interesting business models, right? As far as, the growth in advertising and the metrics that you follow. And he talks about some of that stuff in here, which I thought was really interesting because he doesn't talk about it in the same way that people talk about it now with like ROAS and return on ad spend and stuff like that. But he does talk about, focusing on the metrics that matter and like thinking long term and not just about like immediate short term wins, which I really appreciated, like, and to your point, I have a chapter in my book. They don't need to like you. They need to trust you, you know? So not everybody likes me. That's okay. Right. You kind of have to go through that if you're putting yourself out there. But it's also nice to have people you like around you at times. So,
yeah.
Yeah. And so actually, I want to ask you about that. And it's something that based on you had mentioned, and obviously Ogilvy did too, but John, what you just said, was they don't need to like you, they need to trust you, right? And so I think in this conversation we're having, one of the things that comes to me is this idea of it's actually easier to get people to trust you if they like you, even though there's no real good reason, to trust that, again, as you were saying, you're pumped, right? So in some ways, and I know I'm definitely guilty of this, it's them liking me is an easy way to trust, right? It's like the shortcut to get them to trust you. Right? And so when I think of Ogilvy and we think about what would it be like for him today, it's almost if you're not like the level of competence you have to have in whatever it is you're selling has to be that much greater.
1000%.
It needs to be for somebody that you like. Their competence doesn't need to be that high. And so it's almost like you're a rogue signal. It's not the right term, but the one that came to me, this noise that's coming in, and I don't even know how to handle that if that makes any sense.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, something else that you talked about the self-esteem movement and needing to be liked and everything. There is that group of people, right? And the sales stigma is part of that. Salespeople will do anything, be anything, say anything to get a deal done, right? It's so rampant, and it's why people are scared to death of people like me and anyone who's carrying any sort of sales label, even if you try to go and fabricate a fancy new label so that you don't have to call them salespeople, right? One time I was a financial solutions consultant, salesperson. Right. So, people go out of their way to try to like make it crazy and everything. But I think we're seeing a lot of, the opposite side of that, of be so good they can't ignore you. Right. And this whole kind of thing of being really good at it. And I'm not a very influential person. Right. I'm a big nerd, fuzzy. I got all this stuff going on and everything. And I'm still able to hit my goals, and I'm still able to build trust with people. I'm able to build trust with the salespeople that I'm coaching and the teams that I'm coaching and get my deals done. But I agree that, there are people who can show up with less competency who have more of that influential kind of vibe, or, they rent a Lambo for their ads and everything. So they just kind of are able to paint a picture of how great, incredible they are. And, I put that pressure on myself of like, I'm not going to do any of that lifestyle BS marketing or anything else like that. So I better be really damn good at my craft.
And that's the thing. Like I go back to, and to your point, like if trust is a proxy, or no, if liking is a proxy for trust, right? Then what's the proxy for, like we just read Matthew B. Arnold's book, Shop Class is Soulcraft. By the way, it's a book I would recommend, John, you picking up and
Ooh.
reading as well. You may not agree with all the points that Matthew makes in that book, but they are well thought out and well considered around this area of craftsmanship, particularly craftsmanship as it relates to the limits of material reality versus what the technologists are selling us as far as being able to escape material reality, right? And he wrote this book back in 2009. So Arnold has been on this for a little while, right? And my point is, if trust is, if feeling good about a person is a proxy for trust, then where does that place craftsmanship? And you were mentioning, Chris, that like that puts it in a second level. You were mentioning, John, be so good they can't ignore you. And the tale of the 20th century, not the tale of the 21st, but the tale of the 21st century was how to employ successfully, and Henry Ford was trying to answer this question, all those people who are in the middle between those two poles. Because there's a whole bunch of people in the middle between those two poles. And unless we all want to go back to farms, they got to eat somehow. Yep. And we got to give them some kind of promise. And the challenge that we are faced, which is why I say chaos I believe we are at the end of chaos, is because I think we are all recognizing in our different ways from our different spheres that this challenge of what to do about the people in the middle without mass industry, mass media, globalization, which is falling apart left and right. By the way, that's why the price of eggs are up and they're going to keep being up. I want to put that out there for folks. Like, don't fall into rhetorical traps. Understand it's because of deglobalization. But anyway, and by the way,
that takes to say that it takes you to get a crack a few eggs to make it.
Well, that's all different kind of thing now. And by the way, we covered a book that covers that, and by the way, explains all of that. Last year on the podcast, Peter Zehan's books around accidental superpower, and talks about sort of how deglobalization has been gradually happening, by the way, ever since September 11th, actually, deglobalization has been happening. So anyway, my point is, what do you do with those people if globalization isn't going to work for them, if mass media isn't going to sell them stuff, and they're in a bifurcated fractal attention environment, right? What do you do for those people? How do you solve for that problem? And honestly, no one has a good answer beyond either escaping back to the 20th century, which some politicians and political parties want to do that, or just standing still and hoping that like the rest of the 21st century doesn't see you. Just freeze, and maybe it won't see you. And neither one of those, from my opinion, as a leader, for leaders, are good responses. Neither one of those work, because we can't go back to the 21st century. And if we don't figure it out in America, other countries will figure it out. They will. They're just going to take the steps forward to figure it out. And we may not like, going back to liking, we may not like the way they figure that out. India is going to figure it out a certain way. China is going to figure it out a certain way, as they have already demonstrated. And so you have to step up to the plate, even if the options that you are faced with are not the ones that you particularly appreciate.
Yeah, and I would say too, what you're just talking about, if the U.S. doesn't figure this out, it'll be China or India. We might not like it. Kind of exactly what we're saying here.
Mm-hmm.
And that it may be because it's not the best solution, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so, yeah, as leaders, we need to figure out what is the future.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, it's our job in many cases
mm-hmm.
to create the future, whether that's a massive future like you were just talking about right now, or
mm-hmm.
hey, for my team,
right,
in this moment, the next 6 months, what is our future?
Right. Yeah. All right, back to the book. Back to Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. We're going to talk about the audience a little bit here in the section on how to get clients. 15 years ago, I was an obscure tobacco farmer in Pennsylvania. Today, I preside over one of the best advertising agencies in the United States, with billings of $55 million a year and a payroll of $5 million, and offices in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Toronto. How did this come to pass? As my Amish friends have said, it wonders me. On the day in 1948, when I hung up my shingle, I issued the following order of the day. This is a new agency struggling for its life. For some time, we shall be overworked and underpaid. In hiring, the emphasis will be on youth. We are looking for young Turks. I have no use for toadies or hacks. I seek gentlemen with brains. Agencies are as big as they deserve to be. We are starting this one on a shoestring, but we are going to make it a great agency before 1960. The next day, I made a list of the 5 clients I wanted most: General Foods, Bristol Myers, Campbell Soup Company, Lever Brothers, and Shell. In the old days, it had not been unknown for advertisers of this magnitude to engage dark horse agencies. When the head of a mammoth agency solicited the Camel cigarette account, he promised to assign 30 copywriters to it, but the canny head of R.J. Reynolds replied, "How about one good one?" Then he gave his account to a young copywriter called Bill Esty, in whose agency it has remained for 28 years. In 1937, Walter Chrysler gave the Plymouth account to Sterling Getchell, then in his 32nd year. In 1940, Ed Little gave most of the Colgate account to a dark horse named Ted Bates. And General Foods discovered Young and Rubicam when the agency was only 1 year old. Writing after his retirement, John Orr Young, one of the founders of Young and Rubicam, offered this advice to manufacturers in search of an agency. If you are lucky enough to find some young men with that special energy and daring which leads them into business for themselves, you will benefit from having that incalculably valuable quality serving you. It is easy to be beguiled by acres of desks, departments, and other big agency appurtenances. What counts is the real motive power of the agency, the creative potency. Several great advertising successes have been achieved by advertisers who benefited by the incentive, ambition, and energy of an advertising organization in the process of building a reputation. These large advertisers sought to buy their advertising agency service on a rising market during the agent's work close days or pre-dispose period. By the time I came on the scene, the big advertisers had grown more cautious. God had joined the side of the big battalions. Stanley Razor, who had been the head of J. Walter Thompson since 1916, warned me, quote, "The concentration of industry into huge corporations is being reflected in the world of advertising. The big accounts now require such a wide range of services that only the huge agencies can handle them. Why don't you give up your pipe dream and join J. Walter Thompson?" The new agencies about to embark on the pursuit of their first clients, I bequeathed a set piece which worked magic in my early days. I used to ask prospective clients to ponder the life cycle of a typical agency, the inevitable pattern of rise and decline from dynamite to dry rot. Once every few years, a new great agency is born. It is ambitious, hardworking, full of dynamite. It gets accounts from soft old agencies. It does great work. The years pass, the founders get rich and tired, their creative fires go out, they become extinct volcanoes. The agency may continue to prosper. Its original momentum is not yet spent. It has powerful contacts, but it has grown too big. It produces dull, routine campaigns based on the echo of old victories. Dry rot sets in. The emphasis shifts to collateral services to conceal the agency's creative bankruptcy. At this stage, it begins losing accounts to vital new agencies, ruthless upstarts who work hard and put all their dynamite into their advertisements. We can all name famous agencies which are moribund. You hear demoralizing whispers in their corridors long before the truth dawns on their clients. At this point, I could always see my prospective clients struggling to conceal the fact that I had hit a nerve. Could it be that I was describing his moribund agency? Today, 14 years later, I am shocked by this villainous stratagem. My scholarly uncle, Sir Humphrey Rollestone, used to say of physicians, first they get on, then they get honor, then they get honest. I am now approaching the stage of honesty, and butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. But everything looked different when my bank account was empty. As Gilbert's Pirates King explained, when I sally forth to seek my prey, I help myself in a royal way. I sink a few more ships, it's true, than a well-bred monarch ought to do. But many a king on a first-class throne, if he wants to call his crown his own, must manage somehow to get through more dirty work than ever I do. I love that part, by the way. I do. I love that part of how to get clients. I love that part. And there's a reason why I wanted to bring it up. I love that part. So we talked about how Ogilvy would be in these times, right? And I think of the line from No Country for Old Men that Tommy Lee Jones has when he thinks about his father in that great movie. The last probably legitimate Academy Award winner in the 21st century. And yes, I will fight you on that. I will fight everybody here and everybody listening. You can come for me, send me those emails. Don't send them to John. Don't send them to Chris. This is Hason's opinion. and it is the correct one. So because it's fact. Anyway. Hey, I'm taking a stand. Ogilvy's giving me some guts here. I'm taking a stand. No Country for Old Men. But Tommy Lee Jones, when he's thinking about his father, he has this great line. He says, "You can't help but compare yourself against the old timers. Can't help but wonder how they would have operated in these times." Right. And I think about Ogilvy and how he would have operated in these times. We talked about that. I think he would have, we agree, he would have objected much of modern advertising and is probably narrow and antiseptic, too much following tech trends and, sort of, to John's point, even, changing the name to try to figure out what it is that the market wants to hide with the market. He would have rejected all that. And I think this gets to the point, and it's the same way that he wrote to his audience and wrote copy. He dealt with his clients the same, and this is why I'm bringing this up. He wrote his copy the same way he dealt with his clients. He dealt with his clients as if they had brains, as if they were smart, right? He respected their intellectual prowess. He respected their ability to make a decision. But he also understood, and it's reflected in that little section that I read, that there were things that were being hidden from them that they needed to know. This idea of transparency, this idea of showing how the sausage is made. I think Ogilvy would probably like YouTube quite a bit, because the conceit of YouTube is that I'm going to show you how the sausage is made. That's the conceit. That's the total conceit of that platform. That's why it survives. I'm just going to show you how the sausage is made. And people always say, well, no one cares about how the sausage is made. They just care about the product or eating the sausage. And yeah, there are a lot of people who don't care. That's why everyone on earth is not on YouTube, because everyone on earth doesn't care about that. But enough people are on YouTube who do care to justify its existence. And so he insisted on certain marketing and business operation principles in landing a client that reflected that desire to respect not only the customer he was writing the ad copy for, but also the client that he was working with. And he loved it. He loved that. And leaders who aren't leading because they love it are just managers with huge and large, important sounding titles. They're not doing the thing they need to do. So I guess the question for both of you, and I guess I'll start with you, Chris, here, is we are in a fight for attention, right? We've already brought this up. And it's a social media driven marketing world. And we talked about craftsmanship and all that. But is there a role for a leader, for an organization, for a culture, for a team that cares about and honors the intellectual capacity, not only of its audience, but also of its clients?
Right. Say that again.
Is there a role in the world for a leader or an organization or an agency that respects not only its consumers, but also its clients?
Yeah. So I think with that, if we're talking about, let's start internally, right?
Sure.
Leader in the organization. And yet in respecting that, I think what that can look like is saying, I don't have all the answers. Here's what we think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here is what it is. We've created this, whether that's a product, a process, or even the code, mm-hmm. right? Here's what we've created. Here you go, right? And saying, I don't have all the answers, right? You may not even need to say that directly, but have a culture in which it's understood, we don't have all the answers here, but here it is. And just, you present it and allow the responses to come in, right? And engaging with those responses, I think that's what that looks like. And I think when you do that, people are going to get on board, right? It's like, because this may not be where you're going with it, but it's that humility.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they have pride in what they presented me, but they don't have all the answers. I get to be part of this.
Mm-hmm.
I get to be part of this journey, part of this product, part of this solution. And so, yeah, so that's my initial reaction to that.
Mm-hmm.
John?
I'm a big believer that most of what high-level salespeople do that works are the same things that high-level leaders are doing, right? And so to Chris's point, if you don't know the answer, you should just be transparent with people, right? Like the military has kind of ruined me for taking advice from people who I know have not spent time in the stream, right? Because it's all, well, here's what should work. And they're trying to push scripts and this thing sells itself. Come on in here and sell this thing. And all of these things happen, and salespeople specifically, they're not going to take direction from people who can't communicate that they've actually spent time in the seat carrying a quota, carrying a bag, carrying all of that stuff. And it's really prevalent there because sales is a hard job, right? You're not coming in at your full rate. You have a performance gap. You have to figure it out. And if you have someone who's talking about, well, 30 years ago when I was selling Cutco knives and everything, like, it's going to be really hard for people to take you seriously. So, but the other side of that, and I really like how Chris said this, you're not supposed to know all the answers, right? That's why there's consultants and coaches and people out there that you can go to because they can bring in that depth of experience. So just like no one wants to be with the know-it-all salesperson who knows, oh, you didn't even know what you needed until I walked in the room. No one respects the leader who's like, well, you don't know what to think, but I do because I read a case study on a white paper on a blog post, and this is going to fix everything. And then you try and it doesn't work, and then there's a whole brand new direction and a completely different way of doing it. And it's just very easy to like lose the trust of the people under you. And it's not even necessary because no one's expecting you to have all the answers. Like just be authentic and be transparent. And if you don't know it, experiment, test, figure it out, or hire someone who can speak from actual experience. But fake it till you make it is just not that great, right? It hurts more people and gets more people fired than it actually helps.
When I was first starting out as an entrepreneur, and I will always fundamentally think of myself as an entrepreneur. I just will, right? I'm a starter. I'm a guy who sees a problem and proposes a solution. I am increasingly in my old age, I guess, my elderliness. And if you're watching on the video, I have as many gray hairs. I don't have as many gray hairs as Chris has. I don't have as many gray hairs. I don't have as many gray hairs as Chris has. You might be, yeah. And I think I'm wandering towards where John is. So I'm one of the blessings of of being me in America. So that's one of the perks. I get to age slowly and somewhat gracefully. But I will say, as I get older and as I think more and more about sort of solving problems, I am less and less interested in why. Why does this thing happen, or why the problem is the way that it is, or why are the people or the team or the organization behaving in a particular way, right? I'm less interested in the why because I think why winds you up in a cul-de-sac where you don't wind up figuring out or correcting probably the answer or even answering the two questions that really only matter. How did we get here? Not why, but how did we get here? And what are we going to do to get out of it? And I look at not only the advertising world, but the leadership world that we're in. And, just to sort of give my bona fides a little bit, I cut my eye teeth in marketing with Seth Godin, right? Like, I mean, one of the first marketing books I ever read was Seth Godin's book on Purple Cow, right? And that book kind of blew me away. Right. I had no exposure to marketing. I didn't take marketing classes when I was in college. For God's sakes, I was a Bachelor of Fine Arts major. I hung out with the business school students, right? And, I saw them. They were in my residence hall or whatever when I was an RA, and later on when I was other things. But I didn't go to business school. I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to business school, right? And honestly, that doesn't matter. I found out that much later on. It really doesn't matter. But the principles of marketing, the principles of direct marketing, the principles of being able to respect your audience. This is one of the things I really got from Seth Godin, is this idea of respecting your audience, respecting the people who are reading your copy. But that also then translates as an entrepreneur to respecting your clients. And again, less interested in the why and more interested in the how do we get to more of that? How do we move towards more of that, particularly when it's so easy because of the tech? And I think this is what the tech has done to us as entrepreneurs, as business folks, as sales folks, as marketing folks. The tech has convinced us that all these massive people, even though they're in little tiny niches, but still larger than what you normally would get, all these massive people can be moved just by tweaking their behavior this way or tweaking their behavior that way and tweaking something in the algorithm, and we'll get the outcome that will make the shareholders happy. I mean, Facebook's entire business model is built off of this. This is the whole point of that platform, is to tweak you so that you do the thing, so that you click on the ad, or at the very minimum, just doom scroll past it. And they can then tell the advertiser, like Coca-Cola or whoever, that this is what that eye scroll was worth. By the way, if you're listening, that's the whole game. That's the whole game of social media. All the platforms, from TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, even all of it. The thing, and this is why I'm doing a podcast, the thing that defies all of that is podcasting. Actually, podcasting and blogging defy all of that, which is why they're the dirty stepsisters that almost never get invited to the party. Because of the nature of how podcasting and blogging works, the assumptions underneath that. To do a successful podcast, even if it's only 30 minutes long, you have to respect your audience.
Agreed. That makes sense.
You have to, right? You know, you have to be okay. You can't, to John's point, fake it till you make it. You can't do that. You have to show up. And by the way, if you're showing up and you don't know what the hell you're talking about, but you gradually work your way into it, the audience will respect you for that. The audience will respect you for that. They will appreciate that. They want to go on that journey with you. But if you show up, to John's point, Chris's point, and you're just faking it and you're saying the thing and you're selling the thing because you want to get some click off of some video you posted somewhere, you're scamming people. You're just scamming your audience.
Yeah.
You know, and you're also, and John and I have talked in previous podcast episodes about, you know, and Chris knows this as well about me. You know, I do jujitsu and I do a lot of other things. I got a lot of like slow hobbies, right? Things that take a long time to do. And that goes along with the entrepreneurship thing inside of me as well. And so if something takes a long time to do, you're going to devote some craftsmanship to it. You're going to devote some time to it. It's going to take something out of you. And podcasts and blogging should take something out of you, versus just the clickbaity sort of things that we see floating around. How can leaders push back against, well, not push back, no, not resist. There's a lot of that terminology going on around lately. I want to avoid that because that's too easy. How can leaders build a toehold in the face of all of this? And where does that start, Chris?
Yeah. So, you know, I like how you said that it's the how and the what we're spending too much time on.
Right.
And I think one of the things that comes to mind for me, and I don't want to go too far off on this, but, you know, we know that, you know, somebody who they're waiting to get the results. Do I have cancer? Right. And when they finally get the results, whether it's you don't,
Mm-hmm.
or even you do have cancer, both will say, I'm just relieved that I know. So even the person that gets that diagnosis of you're going to die, they're like, well, at least I know now. And their stress is down, their relief is down, all that, you know, and psychologists say, well, it's because, you know, that there's loose threads.
Mm-hmm.
And now that thread is no longer loose. So the uncertainty is gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when people are asking the why, it's that uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so one of the things that I found helpful, particularly in working in technology, tech support, is, you know, something happens, the client is upset, or somebody internally, and we solve it. It's easy. Well, why'd that happen? And one of the things that I've done said, I'm not really going to worry about it unless it happens to 1% of our clients, right?
Hmm.
So I'm giving a number to it. And so here's the thing. If you I've worked at one place where we had 4.3 million clients. 1% is a big number.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And but if you have fewer clients, maybe you're in the enterprise space, well, still 1%, maybe 4 clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? But just setting that number of, hey, I agree. We don't have the answer here on why this happened, but we're going to move forward. But if it ever gets to that number, and maybe your number as a leader isn't 1%, maybe it's 10%. I don't know. But having something like that, it's giving them that understanding of, okay, we're not ignoring it. But yeah, it's not that important, I guess, because it didn't meet 1%, right?
Mm-hmm.
That number. And so I think that's a great way of framing it and saying, but I'm always open to coming back here
Mm-hmm.
if it hits this. How does that sound to y'all? Oh, that sounds great. Okay, cool. Let's move forward.
I have a lot of notes in this chapter because like there's so much just good sales stuff. And part of the segment that you read about like how butter is not going to melt in his mouth, right? Like the note that I have under that is that, you know, your motivation changes when there's money in the bank, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot easier to stay in the ground, hold the line, qualify with intention, disqualify with the same amount of intention in a sales role. And you know, he actually goes on to talk about like how in that chapter to like not work for tyrants, not work for bullies, right? He refuses to work with clients to where like approvals have to be done by committee and everything, right? So for as, you know, forceful as I imagine the guy probably was, you know, he really has some really good advice so that way he can give his people room to work, which I really kind of enjoy. You know, when people come to me and we're talking about what I do, most of their thinking and assumptions about what sales is so fundamentally flawed, right? How do I get them to say yes? Okay. Let's talk about what happens when you bring on a bad fit, right? Support cost goes up, right? And churn happens, right? You might not even make money back on the client and everything. And it's, you know, you gotta, especially if you're working with salespeople, right? Because it's just so easy to lean into the old mantras of, you know, show them the value they will buy, right? They'll go get a loan to figure it out if it's necessary, and all of these things. And I spend so much time talking about like, let's really define what the no column looks like. So that way we don't get stuck trying to figure out how to force a yes, how to force that fit. And, you know, what's that magic pill that would have got them? Sometimes it's just supposed to be a no, and that's okay, right? But I think one of the things I love the why thing, right? Because I agree, it typically leads to a witch hunt. Why did this happen? Well, Bill over in support, and like get Bill in here, right? And then all of a sudden he's hauled out in front of everybody, you know. And for salespeople, I got to, you know, one of the things that I teach is like you should not be asking why questions, right? Turn all those why questions into how questions. They're way less challenging. You're going to have way better conversations. We'll be like our current guy. Why? You sound like a toddler, you know, like have some savvy. But like, I think the big thing is give your people room to fail, room to figure it out, right? Because, you know, no one comes in locked or loaded day one when there's a performance role. In my opinion, and Hasan, you've been on my show, is
Mm-hmm.
that leadership, sales, marketing are performance roles. There's a performance gap. And even if you're good, you're still going to have to figure out what it means to be good in this like new role, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we sometimes just like set ourselves up for failure. And if you're brought in as a leadership position and you know you're new or fragile or you just got your MBA and everything else and you think everything that you read is just going to be, you know, epic, you're not really going to be collaborative. You're not going to give your people room to like try anything. And then, you know, you're going to be able to hide for a little bit as a bad leader. But eventually you get found out.
Hello. So I'm going to do some shilling here, and hopefully this will be a pause in our riveting conversation for you. I have an offer for you. My most recent book is 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership. It's available in paperback, hardcover, or as an ebook on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and any other place you order books. Now, in this book, I address the 12 leadership areas that I have found leaders need to be the most intentional in to be the type of leader followers actually want to follow. From establishing a foundation of leading teams through managing conflict effectively, all the way through leading teams through change, knowing what to do and why to do it can help readers, like the ones listening to this show, become better leaders. Look, reading this book and living it is like getting coaching from me directly without having to pay my full coaching rate. Head on over to leadershiptoolbox.us, that's leadershiptoolbox.us, and scroll down the homepage and click on the Buy Now button to purchase in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle format on Amazon 12 Rules for Leaders, the foundation for intentional leadership. And that's it for me. Now back to the show.
I love what you're saying there, John. And I feel like it's the other side of the coin that I was trying to get to, where I was saying, here's why we're not going to stay at the whys, right? Here's why we're not going to stay here, and here's what we're going to. Here's what we're moving towards, right? And I love how you're saying that, yeah, there needs to be that room for failure, because talking about craftsmanship, right? It really, I didn't read the book. I really want to go back and listen to that episode, but part of it is about passion. Am I willing to put my whole self into this? And if I know I might get my head cut off, if it goes poorly, I'm not doing it. And John, what I hear you saying, making that room for mistakes that we know will happen. Hey, I can take some chances here because look, I tell my kids all the time, guess what? I'm going to fail in a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to fail at the things that matter, right? I'll fail on some small things, but I'm going to learn from them. Things I'm not going to, and it's just that permission to fail. So I love what you're saying there, John.
Thank you.
The challenge of the what, right, versus the why or the how, right? Or even the challenge of the how, right, which I think is actually the way bigger question. And that's one of the things that we're focusing on, like I said, this year on the podcast, and we'll kind of get to it here in a little bit. How do we build a beachhead? How do we plant the tree, right? How do we, I want to continue with the agricultural idea. How do we plant the seed that will turn into the thing later on? And by the way, it may turn into the thing later on after we're long since gone and we're like plant food ourselves, right? How do we have legacy thinking, right? We very much live currently, well, one of my buddies who's knee deep, actually neck deep in theology, makes this point, and he's not wrong. He says the term secular comes from a Latin term which means new. It means now, it means present, right? And so when we talk about living in a secular age as opposed to a religious age, we associate it with religious connotations, but it really just means a new age, right? Well, if everything's new all the time, then you're not building for a legacy. You're not building for tomorrow, because tomorrow won't come. Tomorrow will just be the next new thing.
Yeah.
And look, I'm as much a sucker for anybody as anybody for advertising. And you can tell how much of a sucker for advertising I am because of the amount of stuff you can see on the video and the microphones you can hear me talking through on this podcast. That means I'm a sucker for marketing. Somebody advertised these microphones to me and I bought them. I had multiple choices and I decided that this one was the one that was going to meet my needs, right?
And
including my Yankees hat. Yes, that says quite a bit, and I'm not going to apologize, nor will I back down. All right. And so anyway, not a fair weather fan either. Been rolling with them for quite some time now. Good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. So my point is, if we're going to build a beachhead, if we're going to move forward on that space, we need to be focused on the how do we do this? How do we cobble together the disparate parts that we have laying around? And I think when people are tired, this is my larger point, when people are tired of or beaten down enough to where they're tired of hearing more and more about it. And I love, John, how you frame this. Why? Like any parent who's ever parented a 2-year-old knows that at a certain point you're just like, you're done. You know, I'm done with this. Yeah. I'm finished.
Don't got bones and pigs can't live. My father-in-law used to tell my wife and her sister that. Taking that one.
You taking that one? That's good.
That's right.
I just say, you know what? We've had enough, and you go to your room. I don't need a phrase. Like this is the line, this is the boundary, and there's enough, right? And John, you know, I know you got kids. You know, I'm sure you've had that moment where you're like, you know what, we're done selling here. You're just going to do the thing.
Oh, my daughter is at this age to where, you know, so she comes to me the other day and she's like, Dad, I want a bass guitar, right? And talk about slow hobbies, right? I started guitar about 2 years ago, right? Still garbage at it, like still learning. And so I'm like, oh, like, and then don't ruin it, you know, like slow it down, right? Don't blow her up. And I was like, okay. And then she comes back the next day and she's like, hey, what do you think about the guitar? And I'm like, well, I mean, your birthday's in August. We just had Christmas, you know, like, you know, let's see if you're still into it. And we listen to a playlist that she builds and cultivates right every day on the way to school. And she's like, wouldn't it be cool if we could like play this song together? I'm like, you don't want to play with your dad. Come on. Like you're just trying to juice me here. Like, don't bullshit a bullshitter. Like, you know, to use that old term. And
Primus playlist?
What's that?
Was it a Primus playlist? Maybe a bass guitar.
Oh man, I mean, she's not quite there yet, Chris, right? So she's like, "Hey, here's a cool song," and I'm like, "Is that cool?" Like, it's very confusing to me. But she comes in all the time, and she has this phrase sometimes that she says, "No, I don't know if this is going to help my case or not. It's not, I promise. It's not. Just get it out there." But on the other side of it, like, I'm it only happens because I was enabling it. Like one time I was on the phone with one of my martial arts buddies, and she comes in and she asks something, and I was like, no, and she was like, why? And I was like, well, because, and I had to give her an explanation. And that was like a rule, right? Because sometimes I'm just lazy, right? And sometimes I just want to say no because I just want to say no, right? And so I've always told her, you're always allowed to ask, right? So she says why, I give my reasoning, and then my buddy was like, you let your kid talk to you like that? I was like, I actually encourage it, you know, and they were blown away. But there are times to where, okay, why? Okay, why? Okay, why? And I'm like, I've done this to myself. I can't be
Mhm.
that frustrated with her, but because I said so. Like sometimes this is really the only real
That's the
reason there
answer.
is,
Yeah. Yeah.
But she listens to my calls, and she, hears the stuff that I talk about.
Mhm.
And one time I was on a call with someone, and she comes in, and she's like, "Hey, Dad," and I was like, "Hey, what's our agreement?" She's like, "I'm not supposed to come in unless it's an emergency." And I was like, "Is it an emergency?" And she's like, "No." And I was like, "So?" She's like, "It can wait." And she kind of sulks out of the room. And my client on Zoom was like, "You talk to her just like you talk to me." I was like, "Yeah, yeah. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
you?"
And sensing tomorrow the conversation could be, so Dad, what would it take for you to buy this bass guitar right now?
Is it a question of time or value? Right?
What do I have to do to get you into this bass guitar
Oh
today?
God, yeah. So like, sometimes we go out as a family, and they want to go over to like the Halloween store or the Christmas decoration store, and I'm like, I'm going to the guitar store. And she's like, so next time I think we should go to the guitar store. And I'm like, wait, wait, wait. I know why you want to go. It's not to like just hang out and take in the spectacle of the guitar. You're just trying to like build your case. So it's been very interesting. So we should probably gonna get a bass guitar, but like not for until her birthday, because you know, I like to give her everything, right? Especially if it's around like
Right.
art and creativity, and I want to empower all of that
Yeah.
stuff. But like, God, you should live with that need a little bit as a kid, in my personal opinion. Not for forever, but for a while.
No. No, you got to hold the line. Like you have to hold the line. Like you said August. So like we'll check back in with you in August. Actually, I think we'll be recording a couple of episodes
We
with
are.
John in August or September. So sci-fi month is coming up here on the podcast in a few months. So we'll check back in with John and see where he's at with the bass guitar.
I'm so worried about this accountability conversation we're gonna have.
Well, it's going to be interesting, and
So-
it's going to be a publicized accountability conversation.
exactly.
So now you're really stuck.
Yeah. So when she gets it in February, just reserve your judgment, right? Whenever we talk about it in August, then I can't hold out that long.
We might
Was me, the guitar would be fine.
by March. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would hold out till August, but it would be rough waters. It would be rough waters, and my wife would look at me and she'd be like, "Really, really, really, you gonna hold?"
You
Yes,
buy it. I hold on.
it's the
Okay.
principle.
Okay. I'm going to pressure test this a little
Go ahead,
bit,
pressure
right?
test it. Go ahead.
Because I would imagine you buy it in March and then sit on it until August.
Yes, actually, that is my move. Yeah, I cannot tell a lie. I have done that move before.
And not even because it's a deal, but
No,
because you get excited about it, right?
I
Like,
do
yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. No, well, and you know what? It's one of those things where what does the kid know versus what do you know? All right, sitting on the anticipation to your point, right?
Yep.
And sort of where do you measure that? And this is why, like, I'm going through this process right now with my youngest child, really working on like understanding the difference, not understanding the difference, understanding the power of promises and commitment.
Yeah.
He's 8, right? And so, you can say anything, but like if you say you're going to do something, you better show up and do it, right? And if you see daddy saying that he's going to do something, you can best be sure daddy's going to show up and do it. And daddy's going to move heaven and earth to do it, which is why daddy doesn't make promises because daddy knows exactly what that means. Right. And so it's a negotiation, and you're teaching your children negotiation, which I fundamentally believe negotiation. And I come from a background in negotiation, right? I believe teaching children negotiation makes them better able to navigate the world that we have, and teaching them how to do it intentionally and exposing them to people who can help them do it intentionally beyond just yourself, is going to make them sharper and sharper adults, particularly as the world of not only sales and marketing, but just advertising and messages and marketing and just all that comes in, because the negotiations are coming fast and furious. They're coming fast and furious all the time. And you have to be able, if you don't build those skill sets into your children, I fundamentally believe as a parent, if you don't build those skill sets into your children, you are failing the future. You're failing your legacy, particularly in our time. All right, let's we can round the corner. Around in the corner here. Let's get back to the book. Back to Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. By the way, the cover of this, I gotta say this. The cover of this book, I mean, I know Mad Men was kind of like based off of David Ogilvy or whatever. I have my own thoughts on that show. But I do love this cover. I got to admit, like it definitely, with the classic sort of font, and it's the black on white and the white on black, and he's got the, and then he's sitting there and he's got the expression. It is very, very, if I were to put a descriptor on it, it is a very, very British cover.
Agreed.
And that makes it stand out from other books, even on my shelf. And of course, it's got the red background, or the red back, and the red spine. And as a person who has self-published 3 books and is getting ready to self-publish a 4th, I got to admit, this is a stunning cover that I probably would have struggled to get out if I had self-published this book. But it is genius.
Okay, I'm working on my 2nd book. You're never gonna see a cover with my stupid face on it. Promise, right? Like, just no, like, can't do it.
It does take a lot of courage.
I don't even want my photo on the back of the book, if I'm being really honest about it, right? Like, I mean, totally okay being faceless, right?
He had a lot of courage. He had a lot of personal chutzpah. I will grant him that.
Yeah, chutzpah. Yeah, like
sitting in Starbucks reading that. Oh, just a little bit more sophisticated.
You're like, I can't get a real cup.
Yeah, I know. In the commercials, where are all the glass cups? I haven't seen these in the stores.
Someone's gonna have to have a conversation with Starbucks. Good luck with that. All right. Anyway, back to the book. Back to Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. We're going to leapfrog. And of course, as I usually say, we can't read the whole book. We can't cover the whole book. It's impossible. Go get your copy. We're reading excerpts from it, and then we're talking about it, and we're putting it inside of a context. But if you want to get all of it, please go out and pick up a copy of this book.
Well, and let me say this too. This is seriously one of the few books that I would say I can see myself reading it once every couple of years. It is that.
Okay. Great. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So we're going to go into so he has a number of different chapters here. It's really well written, really succinctly organized, which kind of goes along with everything else about Ogilvy. And so we're going into chapter 5 here, of how to build great campaigns. When copywriters, art directors, and television producers come to work in our agency, they are herded into a conference room and subjected to my magic lantern, which tells them how to write headlines and body copy, how to illustrate advertisements, how to construct television commercials, and how to select the basic promise for their campaigns. The rules I postulate do not represent my personal opinions. They are the quintessence of what I have learned from research. The recruits react to my lecture in different ways. Some find comfort and security under the command of a chief who seems to know what he is talking about. Some are uneasy at the prospect of working within such rigid disciplines. Surely, they say, these rules and regulations must result in dull advertising. Not so far, I reply, and I go on to preach the importance of discipline in art. Shakespeare wrote his sonnets within a strict discipline, 14 lines of iambic pentameter, rhyming in 3 quatrains in a couplet. Were his sonnets dull? Mozart wrote his sonatas with an equally rigid discipline, exposition, development, and recapitulation. Were they dull? This argument disarms most of my highbrows. I go on to promise them that if they will subscribe to my principles, they will soon be producing good advertisements. What is a good advertisement? There are 3 schools of thought. The cynics hold that a good advertisement is an advertisement with the client's okay on it. Another school accepts Raymond Rubicam's definition, quote, the best identification of a great advertisement is that its public is not only strongly sold by it, but that both the public and the advertising world remember it for a long time as an admirable piece of work, close quote. I produce my share of advertisements, which have been remembered by the advertising world as quote unquote admirable pieces of work, but I belong to the 3rd school, which holds that a good advertisement is one which sells the product without drawing attention to itself. It should rivet the reader's attention on the product. Instead of saying what a clever advertisement, the reader says, I never knew that before. I must try this product. It is the professional duty of the advertising agent to conceal his artifice. When Aeschines spoke, they said, how well he speaks. But when Demosthenes spoke, they said, let us march against Philip. I'm for Demosthenes. If my new recruits boggle at this stern definition of good advertising, I invite them to return to their previous incarnations, there to flounder in silliness and ignorance. My next step is to tell them that I will not allow them to use the word creative to describe the functions they are to perform in our agency. The even more fashionable word creativity is not in the 12-volume Oxford Dictionary. It reminds Leo Burnett of a saying of Bernard Berenson to the effect that the only thing the Etruscans added to the art of the Greeks was, quote, the originality of incompetence, close quote. Fairfax Cohn would like to blot the word creativity out of our lives. Ed Cox thinks that there are no creative or non-creative copywriters, only good ad makers and bad. Bear in mind that Burnett, Cohn, and Cox are among the most creative men in the advertising business. How did we get along 20 years ago before creativity entered the lexicon of advertising? I am ashamed to say that I sometimes use it myself, even as I write these pages. In this chapter, I will expose the reader what he would see in my magic lantern on the day he came to work for Ogilvy, Benson, and Mather. The research on which it is based derives from 5 principal sources. First, from the experience of mail order advertisers. This elite corps, represented by such masters as Harry Sherman of the Book of the Month Club, Vic Schwab, and John Caples, knows more about the realities of advertising than anybody else. They are in a position to measure the results of every advertisement they write because their view is not obscured by those complex channels of distribution, which make it impossible for most manufacturers to dissect out the results of their advertising from all the other factors in their marketing mix. I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs and go down. The second most valuable source of information as to what makes some techniques succeed and others fail is the experience of department stores. The day after they run an advertisement, they can count the sales it has produced. That is why I'm so attentive to the advertising practices of Sears Roebuck, who are the most knowing of all retailers. The third source of data on which my magic lantern depends is the research done by Gallup, Starch, Clark Cooper, and Harold Rudolph on the factors which make people read advertisements, and in the case of Dr. Gallup, the factors which make people remember what they read. On the whole, their findings endorse the experience of the mail order fraternity. And then I'm going to skip down again. More is known about consumer reactions to advertising in newspapers and magazines and consumer reactions to television commercials, because serious research into television, my fourth source, was not started until 10 years ago. And then finally, my last source is less scientific. I am an inveterate brain picker, and the most rewarding brains I have picked are the brains of my predecessors and my competitors. I have learned much from studying the successful campaigns of Raymond Rubicam, Jim Young, and George Cecil. Here then are my recipes for cooking up the kind of advertising campaigns which make the cash register ring. 11 commandments which you must obey if you work at my agency. And commandment number 1, by the way, not going to read all 11. You can get the book. What you say is more important than how you say it. One of the areas that I'm obsessed with as a leadership development consultant, I guess, is my coach, I guess is the correct term for what I do, and entrepreneur and business builder Lately, Chris has been tagging me with the title of media mogul. That's allegedly something having to do with the studio and some clients. I don't know. But one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things I'm obsessed with, is this idea of, and the process of, and it is a process, the process of persuasion. What is the point of persuasion? What is the point of selling? What is the point of leadership? Most people think that things, in air quotes, just quote unquote happen, right? And this gets to that whole point that we were talking about in the earlier segment about the why versus the what and the how. People want to know the why, but they don't want to know the what and the how. And things don't just happen. You have to be curious about the internal mechanisms that come together in persuasion and in selling and even in leadership in order to effectively write what Ogilvy has written here. We know that humans sell to each other, starting at birth. My youngest son, my oldest daughter, my middle daughter, my oldest son, they started selling to me and their mama the second they were out. They are selling ruthlessly. I've often said children are the best salespeople. They just are, because they have absolutely nothing to do with any of the rest of their time than stare at you as parents. That's all they've got to do. They're just collecting data on their target and on the target market, and they're collecting data all the time, even when the target is not paying attention. They are collecting data on you, and they have nothing to do but ruthlessly sell because they don't know failure. They don't know what failure looks like, so they'll just try anything. Let's try anything. Like if my youngest son wants to sell me something, he's got to, like, when he was younger anyway, he knew you gotta daddy's sitting down, you gotta climb up on daddy's lap and like look in daddy's face and like touch daddy's face. Like he's got to touch daddy's face, like touch the beard a little bit, smile, and daddy's gonna go, "What do you want?" And he knows just from the tone of voice, like when that tone shifts, he's like, "Oh, gotcha, sucker." Now I can ask you anything. Meanwhile, my youngest daughter, she called me the other day when I was literally 4 feet away from the house and said, "Could you go get some chocolate chip cookies from the store, Daddy?" And she put the daddy on the end, and I'm like, "Oh, that was Daddy." It's Daddy when it's chocolate chip cookies. It's Dad when, well, it's take out the dog or anything else. Anyway, so what am I doing? I'm turning around and going to get chocolate chip cookies. Like, all right, fine. Yes, okay, whatever. Yes, you got me. Okay. Persuasion, selling. All selling is the final act of persuasion, and being curious about who you're selling to, and to a certain degree why you want them to buy so badly, is a key part, I think, of leading people. So, question here. I didn't really write a question in the script here. I just sort of left it blank because there's a bunch of thoughts here. Some thoughts on this. Like, if you had to work for Ogilvy, if you had to sell and persuade, you had to sit through his 11 commandments, Chris, what are you going to do there?
I'm glad you're starting. I really want to listen to John on this.
Yeah.
His reaction. So for me, and I can't remember the two names, but it was when one person spoke, we all marveled at his words.
Oh, Demosthenes, yeah.
When the other spoke,
yeah.
We all marched. Right?
Yes.
And much like Ogilvy, I want to be the guy that causes people to march.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, what is the purpose of it is to get somebody to join me in a better future, what I think is a better future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that future may just be beneficial for me, not beneficial for them.
Sure.
Right? Who knows? There's a lot of ways we can go there, but that's what it means to me to persuade.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I'm really, really curious to hear John's take on this.
So the way that I talk about it with people, because of the selling stigma, right? And I work with a lot of founders, right? Like, while I think a lot of people would get really great information from this book, I think if you're starting a business and you're selling, even if you're just going to go out and freelance as a graphic designer or a copywriter yourself or a website designer, you need to read this book, right? Because first and foremost, you got to think about the audience, right? And it's not about your opinion, right? I'm 44 years old, right? So when I'm talking to a guy who's 20 years old and isn't even sure if he wants to be in sales, he's not even sure how he got here. He just couldn't find a job in the role that he wanted, so he's going to give this a shot. and I'm so passionate about this and I love it. And I study these things. Like I study ads and I study like, you know, okay, who is that for? Because I hate it. So it's obviously not for me. So who's it for? It took me a long time to even kind of think about it that way. But one of the things that I have to talk about is the difference between persuasion and manipulation, right? Manipulation is doing everything you can to get the outcome that you want. And persuasion is about getting them to make a decision so we can have the closure we need as salespeople so we can manage our time well, right? So can you build trust enough so that way they'll tell you no? Because if you're the timeshare salesperson or the used car salesperson, it's a question of time or value. And when do you want to make a decision? And when can I follow up and everything? They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear so that way they can get a clean getaway and then be like, screw that guy. I'm never going back there. Right. And then they go buy from someone else who doesn't give them that treatment. Right. So I know it's wild that I have to teach people that it's okay to hear no. Right. And that you should be helping them guide them to the place of no, because some people will just kind of sit and spin. It's like, old Windows computers, right? And the little wheel comes up, it's just spinning endlessly, right? Like that's where people are, right? And decision fatigue leads to indecision. And if they can't figure it out and they can't trust you to help them figure it out, what are we doing here, right? So I have to spend a lot of time talking about that with people, and I had highlighted part of that as well about good advertisement is one that sells a product without drawing attention to itself. I heard a long time ago that like the first level of, rhetoric and persuasion is like make someone else the enemy, and it's super easy, right? You scroll on LinkedIn, cold calling is dead, cold email is dead, marketing is dead, and everything is dead, right? Just to kind of make it easy to kind of like separate yourself from everything else. But like my favorite ad was, I think it was a Swatch or a Timex ad, right? And it was a billboard. And it has this very simple watch. And it's like a watch for people who don't want to be reminded of the 1,000 emails that they've not read yet. And I love that ad because it speaks to one audience, but it doesn't beat down or, demonize the other audience. It's just white noise to them, right? Because it's super easy to go after any other segment and make them the enemy and everything. But like there's people who don't want to be marketed to like that. So that ad was just so, because here's the thing. If you're an Apple fanboy and you want all those notifications and everything, you're going to hate that ad and that's totally okay. They're not even coming after you about it, right? They're just saying that this is for those people who don't want that. And that's okay, right? Like I talk about being curious as a salesperson, right? And then being skeptical to make sure that you're actually hearing what's being said and not cherry picking the things that you want to hear. So that way you have commission ears, right? Or happy ears, as it's sometimes called. And so that way you can, okay, help me understand, right? You're already working with someone. Why would you ever leave? Right? Asking questions like that builds a lot of trust. But if you're just in there to take no prisoners and follow up until they block you and everything, you don't do you don't do the conversation that way, right? And it stays very shallow. You're not actually building any trust. And then they feel like they're not heard. They can't trust you. And you're not going to persuade them to give you an outcome. They're going to get away. And then you got to follow up and try to re-engage them 18 times, I think is the current metric for marketing and following up and everything. You should be able to get to the heart of it within one or two conversations if you're really good at what you're doing.
That's great. I love what you were, and you just said their outcome. What I was hearing you say was we need to get them to do something, anything, even if that thing is no.
Yeah.
And I love that because I have definitely been guilty of I've had a conversation with you. I don't know what you're selling me right now. And no, I'm really not interested in following up with you. And it actually takes some effort for me to tell you no. It's easier for me just to ignore you. And so that's you're saying any outcome, even if it's no. I love that.
And I have to. I was on a call with my coach, my jujitsu professor, right? We talk about these things, and I give him, and so we're on a call, and I get a cold call, and I'm like, I got a cold call, like I'm going to answer it. You down? And he was like, yeah, I don't care, answer it. And so they call, and it's for something that doesn't make any sense for me because I office out of my home. It was like professional trash pickup and stuff like this, and I'm like, and the guy's like, I'm going to talk to the person who handles the trash, and I was like, that's me, and he was like, oh, okay, I'm so glad to connect with you. And he pitches me, and I was like, hey, I work from home. This is never going to be a need. I'm not worth your time. And he was like, okay, thanks a lot. Right. And so we get off the call and he was like, that was the most direct no ever. And I was like, being a sales guy, the one thing I know how to do is to make the no as clear as possible. Because what happens is people create all the follow-up that they can't stand, right? Because they're not clean, clear, and direct with their salespeople, because sometimes you feel like you can't. That would not, and that's where you got to be checking of yourself and really make sure that you're communicating cleanly. But if it's not, these people who are not being paid their full rate because they get paid commission are taught, if it's unclear, keep pushing. If it's unclear, keep pushing. So the obvious response is to be clean and clear, right? All these people reach out to me about lead gen. John, we can stack your calendar with blah, 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 these appointments. No, thanks. I don't believe that this is going to work, and I'm not willing to pay for it. I actually got into an argument the other day on LinkedIn with a guy who wanted me to join a local mastermind group. I'm not going to name them. But I was like, hey man, I'm down the network if you'd like. I might know some people who'd be a good fit for you. I'm not a fit. And he goes, John, I believe you are a fit. No, man, I'm done. The minute you make a bold, assumptive statement, like you know anything about my business or actually what it is I do, I know you haven't, right? And so I was like, hey man, there's a sales lesson in here, and then he got a little bit immature and a little bit indignant and put like a childish barb in there because he needed to win the interaction. And I was like, yikes, man, you're not going to make it, bro. Like, holy smokes. So it's a hard job, sales side, and then it gets reinforced badly by people who don't know what they're doing. And so then these people are they're going through stages of follow up and just checking in, just nudging, putting this on the top of your email inbox before the weekend and everything. And it's like, if you were going a little bit more out of your way to have a direct conversation and allowing them to be direct with you whenever it's a no, everybody saves so much time, right? So I have to teach people, tell them in the beginning that no is okay. Hey, son, at the end of this conversation, you might not need anything that I do, and that's totally okay. If you get there and you make that decision, can you raise your hand and just let me know? Because I'm not here to waste your time, right? It creates trust, right? It's a persuasive element though, right? Because if I don't tell them that, I have to spend enough time with them so that way they actually know that, and that never behooves me, right? So be clean, be clear, be direct, but also understand that you're adding persuasion to it so that way you can get closure at the end of 2 conversations and not 15 conversations.
That is great. And I think too, what I heard in there was be very clear. Don't leave anything, off the table. Just it's all there. I'm saying 100% instead of 98%. I think when we think about being the leaders, I think there's a lot of application there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I need feedback from you, right? I want to go here. I want to do this, or I want you to do this for our clients. And what do you think, right? Like, I want you to be part of that conversation, but being clear, this is exactly what it is. And I think that's really important because in here, Ogilvy said something along the lines of, don't assume that they're reading all of your advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't make one advertisement one part of the story. The whole story should be there. And I think as leaders, and I myself am guilty of this at times, I'm not given the whole story, right?
Yeah.
Because
lots
I think
of assumptions are being made.
They may be afraid of it, or going back to what we said earlier, I don't have all the answers, right? And but I feel like, or I think this is the right future for us. I just want to get us there. And you said it. That's actually manipulation. So as leaders, even with good intentions, we can find ourselves actually manipulating people, right? Yeah. So that's a little humbling for myself. But yeah, I love that. So say it all, get it on the table, and let's go from there. And I think as leaders, as you said, hey, will you raise your hand if this is a no-go? I think as leaders, it's important for us to let our team know. And that's what we say. And one of the things I love telling new people to my team is, look, I got thick skin. Just don't talk about my mama, my wife, my kids, or my dog. That's anything else is on the table, right? But it's just what you were talking about, John. It's inviting that feedback, inviting
100%.
It'd be uncomfortable, but just say those are the things that are off the table, right? Because we all know something's off the table. Not just my mama, my wife, my kids, and my dog. That's all.
And I'm going to push back actually a little bit on Hasan, because he read the first one, right? And we all know how short attention spans are. And someone is going to hear that line because they're not going to read the book, and they're going to be like, you know what? Because here's the thing. That line only makes sense. It's not important or how you say it. It's what you say. That only makes sense if you read the other 11 commandments or however many there are, because he talks about being distinct. He talks about using numbers. He talks about like painting the portrait and doing it the right way. And I cannot tell you how many times, like, okay, how'd the sales conversation go? Or how did that one-on-one go with your direct report? Well, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, is that how you said it? And they're like, well, does that matter? Are you kidding? How could it not matter? Right? Like you look at books like Radically Candid, or Radical Candor, and she's like, we don't get to measure it at our lips. We have to measure it at their ears. Right.
Mm.
And so lots of times leaders, and this happens all the time in sales calls, right? A guy that I was coaching one time works for a big commercial insurance company, and he got an RFP from Yeti, right? And massive opportunity, and I was like, cool, man, you put that in the CRM? He was like, hell no, I'm not putting it in the CRM. And I said, why? That's why these systems exist. And he was like, man, as soon as I put that in there, I'm going to have 5 people asking me if it's real. And I'm like, well, that's garbage leadership, because they should have trust for you as a salesperson. And the CRM is meant to be a feedback loop and mechanism, and not like a metal polishing contest and everything. And I was like, man, let's prove that assumption to be true, right? Put in the CRM. And he does. And then like the next time we talk, he was like 2 minutes later, my boss's boss was like, hey, is this real? Right. And sometimes that happens, right? You're walking down the hallway, you see someone, that you've not talked to, because you're busy, blah, blah, blah. Hey, like, how's your pipeline looking? Good, boss. Good. Like, not appropriate, right? You're not getting real great information, nothing actionable there. So for anyone who's listening to this, please go read all the commandments, and then we can talk about that it's more important of what you're saying than how you say it. But if you're not going to read the other 11 as a salesperson, I promise you it matters how you say it. It matters how you communicate your ideas, how you communicate the value and things like that. Promise it does.
Yes, and I'll say this, and if you want to test whether or not John's correct on this, if you're married, just try it with your spouse. That's all.
Absolutely.
Going to be a hot time in the old town tonight. Yes, it is. Going to be some vigorous feedback.
There's going to be some how dare yous. I think in some households after people listen to the try it.
But okay. So I yes, if you don't read the other 10 commandments that go along with this, right, where I stopped, it makes no sense. You're correct. And I think that we have to acknowledge, and by the way, this is not the short attention span theater thing. We have to acknowledge that one of the things that we're asking people to do, and I've been asking people to do it for 4 years now on this show, I'm asking people to go out and to take some time to engage in long form learning, right? And engage in learning that is going to take some time for you to get through, right? So John, to your point, I mean, you said, you highlighted this, you highlighted your Kindle version of this book, right? Chris, you were saying that this is a book you probably read once every couple of years, right? This shows, and this is why I opened up this show today by stating that I believe this is one of the best business books of the 20th century. I think people will be reading this 2 centuries from now. I think this one actually makes it down the mountain. I don't think other business books do. This is why we don't usually cover them. Actually, we don't cover them on this show. This is one of 2 exceptions, right? I think this exception will be on the Mount Rushmore. I think it's going to make it because, John, to your point, the things that are in it about persuasion and about selling are going to be universal and can be universalized across time and space. So I can take these exact same principles and I can go to Brazil. Yeah, I'm going to have to put them in a Brazilian context. Yeah, I'm going to have to put them in a Brazilian container. But at the end of the day, the principles are going to be the same, right? Particularly around persuasion, right? I can go to India, put them in an Indian context. They're still going to be the same. I can even go to China and put them in a Chinese context, and they will be the same because the principles are universal. The principles are human. And that's That's what we see in this book. And by the way, that is what David Ogilvy was able to get to through his distillation of his experience. And by the way, the way the man writes, you talk about Demosthenes, and he's using these big words and these big terms. What struck me in going through this book, and it continues to strike me in the books that we read on this podcast, is the level of, and I'm going to use a big word here, erudition.
Oh, hold on. Where's my dictionary?
That is in his 12-point font Oxford Dictionary, by the way. The level of wordsmithing, of word usage that he uses, and the allusions that he makes to things that, if you have a classical British education, you're going to just know. In the mid-20th century, you're just going to know. Sure, you can strip all that out. You can simplify the language. The principles are the same. He's chasing a principle here. So, John, I liked how you said, you don't have to win the interaction. I think that's hugely important for leaders to understand. And I want to echo what Chris said here, making the no as clear as possible. That's one of the things that I go over with leaders all of the time. No is a sentence. I think we said that actually last year in the Fahrenheit 451. No is a complete sentence. I am not in the sales space. And so when people call me, or when people are trying to pitch me on something and I do not want it, I just say no, and then I hang up. No, please remove me from your list. And then I hang up. I don't even give you a chance to respond to me. Just please go away. Leave me be. On the buyer end of this, I think, and maybe this is part of building for the future, in the 20th century, coming out of the 19th century, in a mass communication world, you had buyers and audiences who were unsophisticated. In the 21st century, and in the back end of the 20th century, going into now the 21st century, I think people are way the heck more sophisticated than sellers and copywriters and marketers give them credit for. I think people actually are more sophisticated, but they're not sophisticated in such a way that they can articulate what their sophistication is. Agreed. They can't say it. They just intuit it when it's negative. Yeah. Now, you can't put intuition into an FTC, rule, right? And the FTC is out there to protect those people who lack intuition, okay, and lack the ability to suss out what's a scam versus what's not. And government's always late to the table. They're like the last drunk kid at the party. They just are. And the party has already moved down the block like 3 hours ago. And currently, by the way, the block that we're all moving down, and I swore to myself this was going to be the first episode this year that I was going to mention this, and I've held out. We're moving down the block to AI. We've already moved down the block. We're down the block there. We're messing around. We're having a drunken party in that house right now. We're at the beginning of the drunken party. And it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be everything that was in the last drunken party when the internet came on, and then the last drunken party before that was social media. It's going to be the same drunken party. It's going to be the same thing. The tool is just going to be different, right? And government will eventually come along behind. Again, late stage kegger. They'll come along at 3 a.m. and they'll want to make a bunch of rules, and we will have already moved down the road to whatever's after AI.
Yeah.
I think the generations of people that we have in the world today, particularly in the West, who have gone through now what I term 4 major revolutions. We went through the internet revolution. We went through the decline of mass media revolution and the breakup and the defragmentation of mass media revolution. By the way, that revolution is still ongoing. It's still going. I mean, say what you want. CNN doesn't pull the kind of numbers that a cat video does on YouTube. That's just a reality that we're in. We're in that reality. And again, we can have an opinion about it. We can talk about it, but this is the reality. This is what we're facing, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got the defragmentation of mass media, or the fragmentation of mass media, not the defragmentation, but the fragmentation of mass media. We've got the internet. We've got social media. And again, we are now in the midst of a massive social argument about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, yada, 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 yada. That's all part of that's part of that revolution. That's the third revolution. And then the fourth revolution, which we're now at the beginnings of, is the LLMs and the massive data gathering across the internet to try to make a semblance of knowledge of some kind of something that will, of course, serve the technologists' whims to sell us more, paper airplanes or bottles of water or whatever the hell they're going to try to sell us. Okay. Those are the four major revolutions. At least those are the four that I can identify in my lifetime that I've been through. There might be a fifth revolution coming on the other side of this. It just depends upon how quick we get through this LLM thing, right? And by the way, underneath there was the Bitcoin revolution and the AR, VR revolution, which also sputtered out or may still be going. I have no idea what Meta's doing. Still going, okay, all right. I have no idea what Meta's doing. But we've got these revolutions, and at the bottom of all of them, and this is why I opened up this year with Shop Classes Soulcraft, at the bottom of them is still material reality. Material reality is still at the bottom of all those revolutions. Material reality is still the container that all those revolutions push against. And Ogilvy's words stand in respect of material reality, I think, particularly the limits of material reality. And I think these words stand in stark contrast. And this is the other reason why I think it'll last. They stand in stark contrast to the revolutions of the new that we keep going through over and over again, which keep creating that sense of chaos. And they stand as a way to build on something else that's actually going to be a bulwark against nonsense. This is why I love this book.
So I have a question, if I could.
Yeah.
Right, because you made a statement that this is one of the best business books ever, right? And you think it's going to live on in
of the 20th century anyway, yeah.
Right, in the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah.
And I think all three of us here understand that like leadership is a sales function. It's persuasion. It's about motivation. It's about getting other people to take the actions, right? But
yes.
Hey Son, how many people do you know that are like, yeah, I'm a leader and I sell my people into taking no, like there's so much sales stigma. Nope. I just tell people what to do and then they're going to do it. Like there's such a turn away from this stuff. Right. So but here's the thing. Every copywriter I know loves Ogilvy. Right. So how do you, and maybe I'm just out of touch. Are you talking to leaders and they're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm a persuasive leader, right? And I get people to go because like, I think people end up there if they stay in the game for long enough. But I think when you're new, you have some ideological idea that you can just show up and tell people what to do and they're going to take those actions. And they are going to hate this whole idea that you have to be persuasive as a leader.
They hate it until they wind up with that first problem follower. They hate it until they wind up with that first person where charisma or their resume or their credentials don't work. That first immovable object that meets an irresistible force. And usually that first interaction happens within the first 6 or 8 months of them being a leader. And they do everything they possibly can for the remaining 4 months of that year. And then at the end of that year cycle, their performance review comes in and that person pops up and they are critiqued mercilessly about how they mishandled that. And then they call me. That's usually what happens. Because the credentials, the attitude, the entitlement, and by the way, this has nothing to do with age. This is everywhere. Entitlement, the prestige of your degree, whatever it is that you were leaning on as a method of persuasion, even though you didn't use that word, failed. And the reason why it failed is because you didn't understand the principles that Ogilvy talks about, also that I talk about and have talked about for years in training and development. So you're right. They're not coming to me right off the bat, but they come to me after that first year. They do. They come to me when they hit that first failure. They come to me when that first person tells them, to your point about being in sales, that first person tells them no. And their boss is saying, you need to go get a yes. And now they're trapped between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that when the boss tells them you got to get a yes.
Oh, 100%.
I think that's really where the rub happens. I don't think it's just because they got that employee, right? That's giving them a hard time. But it's when, no, you actually have to get them to come over to this side, this
100%.
way of thinking, this future that we're going to have. yeah, I think that's where the rub is, right? And they might be lucky. So I'll tell you, I was actually fortunate where I had, and I'm going to quote Ogilvy here, that few of the great creators have bland personalities. They are often cantankerous egotists, the kind of men who are unwelcome in modern corporations, right? And
I mean,
so I was fortunate, and I'm guessing, I could be wrong, I'm guessing I'm one of the few that had somebody like that, and I was able to get a glimpse of their genius and went, get rid of that. Lose out on that, right? But I do think those exist. And so, yeah, I think there are people that do realize, oh, I've got to persuade. But yes, I think and I think this may be where you're going with the job. It may take them a while to realize, oh no, that's actually part of the gig here.
I remember, I mean, I was working on a project and I'm trying to keep all the details murky. Um, and we were in a room, right? It was CEO, head of sales, head of marketing. I'm there trying to, make everyone play nice together and everything. And a person says, "Hey, we just got to fire everyone, bring in new people. That's going to fix all the problems." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is not just like a thing that happens in really bad like business movies and stuff like that. Like people actually feel this way, right?" And I was like, now those people were not thinking that they needed to be persuasive leaders, right? And to the point that you're both making, it's super easy to cast the blame on someone else, and they don't want it bad enough, and why don't they get it, and good work is so hard to find, and all this other stuff that people do when they're like not taking any ownership for their actions and everything. But to both of y'all's point, it's not until someone else and is like, oh, hey, yeah, it's hard, you can't just fire them though, like you got to find a way to try to get them motivated and like actually get them to kind of move in that right direction. But I think people, they still don't see it as selling,
Oh
right?
no,
Because
I think you're spot on, and sorry to interrupt, but honestly, this conversation is one of those, oh yeah, I am selling in that context, right?
yeah,
And
Dan Pink's book, To
I'm
Sell Is
like
Human,
you,
phenomenal book. Like,
I'm 44 going, oh wait, and I've been in leadership 20 something years. And it's not that I've never had the thought before, but this conversation right now today is a reminder of I'm selling.
I will tell entrepreneurs that I work with, right, who are struggling to build their first startups, right, struggling to build their first products, who think that their biggest problem is money. They do. They all think their biggest problem is money. And if they could solve that problem by getting customers to pay them more, fine, cool. If they could solve that problem by getting some VC or rich uncle to sign them a big check, cool, fine. Money will solve all the problems. Matter of fact, I just had a conversation with somebody about this today. Money will solve all the problems. Mark Cuban infamously said, "Sales solves all problems." Okay, Mark, let's get that aside for just a minute. You might want to chill out there, bro. You and I need to have a conversation about that crappy website you sold to Sucker in like 1999. Well, let's go back and talk about that, by the way. We never talk about that, but that's okay, Mark. Anyway, may I call you Mark? It's okay. I'm going to call you Mark. Yahoo did write that down, and then Yahoo got written down, but we won't get into that. When I talk with those entrepreneurs, the first thing I tell them, or first thing I ask them is, how are things going in your house? Not in the business, not with the sales, not with how are things going in your house? And the reason why I ask them this question, and the reason why this is an important question, and it goes to this point of you are selling even though you don't think you are, is because the only sale that should matter to you as an entrepreneur is that very first sale of your spouse, your partner, whoever it is you're living with. Exactly. If you have never closed that sale because you didn't think you needed to sell, because you don't think you're a salesman, you failed your startup already. And by the way, failed as in you may have great financial success, but it won't mean anything.
yeah, you'll be divorced.
You'll be divorced.
Yeah.
Your kids will hate you. You'll have a yacht with like I don't know, a Lauren Sanchez type walking around. And yes, I did pick on her. Sure, why not? A Lauren Sanchez type walking around, Jeff Bezos' new girlfriend. That will be walking around your yacht. That person will be walking around your yacht, but it won't mean anything. Yeah, go ahead.
She did prove to us that Zuck is not an animal. Yes, sir. That was valuable.
I'm gonna let Chris stand on his own on that. The cheese stands alone. Chris is a big boy. He can defend himself. He knows what he said. My point is, if you don't make that sale, if you don't believe that to sell, to your point about Dan Pink's great, titled book, To Sell Is Human, right? If you don't believe you're in sales, if you don't understand that you're in sales, if you don't understand that sales function to your spouse, your partner, whatever your family situation is, and even if you're single, let's say you're single and fancy free, right? You're still selling. You're selling to your grandma, or you're selling to your mom and dad. You are in that space. And so, yes, John, I recognize the stigma. I don't disagree with that. But the stigma doesn't take away, to my point about material reality, the facts of material reality. It doesn't take it away. It may move it in your head to a different spot, which, okay, that's fine. I mean, we could talk about positioning then, but that's a totally different conversation.
Different conversation.
But you may want to think about that, but it doesn't change the material fact of what we're doing. And all acts of persuasion are selling. They just are, so we are all salespeople, whether we want to be or not. All right. Well, rounding the corner here, because we got to close out. I promised myself we were going to have discipline this year on the show.
How's that going so far?
Pretty good. I just looked at my watch once. It's actually going pretty good. And it is a Timex, by the way.
It was looking quite fancy. I was, because, Chris brought up your hat. I was going to be like, in that watch.
Watch. Yeah, it's a Timex. It's fine.
Sales guy, all right? Big ass watch.
It is big ass watch. That's right. Not to be confused with his Apple Watch over there. I don't know what Chris is doing. He likes all those notifications. God bless him.
We were talking earlier. I'm like,
yeah. So one of the things we like to do this year, like we started doing this last year, is sort of propose solutions to problems, right? And the problem I think that we've discovered several different things, but one of the biggest things I think we've discovered is, or talked about today, is the problem of how to emerge from the chaos of selling and of marketing over the last 25 years and actually build something that's meaningful and solid, that respects the audience, but also respects the client. So I'll close with this question. Let's talk over the solution for this. And by the way, I don't care. I'm going to say this to guests every time this year. I don't care how wild-eyed and crazy the thing is. I do not care. I do not care. I am no longer quantifying solutions. I'm not doing that, or qualifying solutions. I'm saying we are in a time now where we need crazy solutions, because the chaos, just standing still and hoping the chaos won't get us, or returning to the past, those are no longer options. So there's no bad ideas. There's just solutions, right? Implementation, execution, those kinds of things to me are uninteresting right now. What I need is a proposed solution. So what is the solution to that challenge of building a sales? Let's make it very simple. A sales agency that respects its audience in the and being a sales leader in the 21st century. John, I'm going to start with you, and then Chris, you're going to get to wrap us up and bring us home. Go ahead, John.
So I think the answer is, from entrepreneurship, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to help the people that you want to help, or how to sell your idea and stuff like that, all the way to leadership and everything. You can't just build it in the ivory tower, right? Hey, do people like this? Yeah, bro. Yeah, everyone likes this, right? And no one's talking to a customer, right? And then, this happens all the time in sales teams, right? They're up there, they're ideating and okay, cool. Here's this idea. And I've been the recipient of this. Hey, John, do you think you can sell this? And I'm like, has anyone asked us for this? Well, no, but you're going to have to go figure that out. And it's like, okay, what happens if I come back and I tell you that nobody is asking for this? No one sees value in it. Well, that's not going to happen, John, because we're really smart people. Meanwhile, no one has had a conversation with anyone in the audience, right? So founders, stop drinking your own damn Kool-Aid. I'm talking to myself as well because I used to have the cape on and think I was going to help everybody. Go talk to people in your segment. What do you want? Where are your challenges? What are your gaps? Take it directly from them. Because if you're not in that seat, once again, as a 44-year-old man who works a lot of 20-year-olds, I don't know what they need if I'm not spending time with them, if I'm not talking to them, if I'm not pulling it directly from them. We sell the way we want to be sold, we lead the way we want to be led. Okay. And so if you're not spending time with the people that you're leading of like, hey, how can I be a better leader? If you're not a salesperson or entrepreneur being like, hey, what are you really looking for in a solution? You're going to miss more than you're going to hit. Right. So swallow your pride, put your ego on the shelf, go spend time with the people in that audience that you're trying to motivate and persuade. So that way you don't have to miss as big and then make it a big egoic battle. Just go talk to people and like listen to their perspectives and listen to their feedback. That's all I got.
Say ditto, and then we rolled a credit. I mean, if so,
Sure.
okay, ditto. No, but
Sure.
I'm just going to piggyback on that, John. I think that, and that's where I was kind of thinking, but you put it in so much better words. Get to know them, talk to them, get out there, and part of that, and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it. That requires a little bit of vulnerability, right? To really, I mean, we're talking connect with them, understand them. And to piggyback on what you're saying of we sell the way we want to be sold, we lead the way we want to be led, and we also, I don't know if y'all familiar with the 5 love languages, but we display love towards others the way that we want to be loved. And that may seem for the listeners like, what is he talking about? But my example is this: my son is the best gift giver I have ever met. And the way to connect with him? Through gifts, right? Like, so he is demonstrating to me the best way to connect with him, the best way to reach him, right? And so guess what? The people you're trying to sell to are going to do the exact same thing. So that's what I was.
Well said, man. I really like that. Like I wasn't thinking about the love languages aspect, but man, I don't want public admiration, right? Look at the stuff that John did, but like 1-to-1, right? Hey, John, good job. I'm down for that, right? And then also, so many salespeople are threatened, right? Well, we're going to fire you if you don't clean it up or whatever. Man, that's not motivating to most people, right? If you're a big OD type, sure, right? Like just go win more and everything. But like if you're not really thinking about how, like what's really going to unlock higher performance in this individual, and you're just defaulting to, well, I'm just going to go put them on a performance improvement plan. And like, then they're just looking for other jobs and other roles and you've missed the mark completely. And, yeah, like go figure out how they're actually motivated. Don't assume it's the same way you're motivated. That's a super solid point.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank John Hill, aka Small Mountain, for joining us today. And I'd like to thank Chris Widner. Widner.
Man,
Small mountain, I'm wide nerd.
Wide nerd. Now I'll remember it. Wide nerd. There you go. Now I'll remember it. Chris Widner for coming on our podcast today. And with that, well, we're out.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.